Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. It is a Tuesday morning, and it's time to get back to Intro to Mass Media. As you can see, we're in a little flowery shirt here, trying to, as we start to get a little cooler, try to get those summer vibes back. So, hopefully, I think by Wednesday or Thursday, we might have a couple of days in the 70s, and probably our last ones before the chill really starts to set in, and especially if you want to go trick-or-treating on Halloween, you got to wear a coat over your costume. Yeah, I know, you're probably all like, oh, Eccles, we're college students. Hey, you're never too old to trick-or-treat, all right? So, radio quizzes, if you didn't get your radio quiz in on time by Monday at 8 p.m., it's not going to count. Remember, we have deadlines, people. I send this out with plenty of time. You got 3 or 4 days to do it, but that's what deadlines are all about, okay? So, please make sure for the next quiz you get it in on time. Radio, radio is very special to me. It was something I wanted to do since 1973. I was 8 years old, got a clock radio for my birthday, and I would just listen. I'd listen at night, going to bed, especially to baseball games. Back then, a lot of games were not on TV. To give you an example, many of you, of course, have grown up, let's say, the Yankees. All 162 Yankee games televised. Okay, it's been like that for a while now. But yet, when I was growing up, only about 40 to 45 games were televised. Believe it or not, they still thought that if you televised the games, it would keep people from coming to the stadium itself. That was back when they thought ticket receipts was a better way to make money than by television advertisements. But boy, did they learn fast. It's the advertisements that really make you the money. But every game would be on radio because, of course, radio would be much cheaper to produce than a television broadcast. So I would listen to a lot of the Yankee games at night on the radio. And then, of course, in the morning, I was always curious in morning radio, who was the more entertaining, how they would approach it, and that kind of thing, which then led to my own short but very successful 3-year career doing morning radio in Terre Haute, Indiana, which I love. But I will tell you this, I did 3 years at a station called Mix FM. We were the number one pop station in the market. I got out of radio for a couple months and then got lured back in, and I did mornings for a year at a hot new country station. But let me tell you, this is the beginning of the end of what radio is truly like. Is I worked for a station, okay? We were in Terre Haute. What we would do, though, is we would receive a satellite feed from Colorado. And in this place in Colorado, it was the Jones Radio Network. And they had all kinds of different formats in this one building that they would broadcast, and then by satellite, you would pick it up all over the country. Basically, they were the Jones Radio Network. So we picked up their hot new country format. So the DJs were there in Colorado. The music was there in Colorado. All we did was pick up the feed. About the only thing I would do is, after a while, I would do the morning show live in Terre Haute, and then I'd just flick on a switch when I was done with the morning show and pick up their feed. And of course, what would happen is that they would send us the feed. We didn't have to have any music out of our place except for during my morning show. Didn't have to do any of the commercials except for some of our local spots that would go on instantly after the Jones Radio Network national commercials would come on. Then our local spots would come on. And they'd split the profits with us, basically just like NBC did. And you'll have to excuse me, we're in my living room now, and I just happened to look out the front door. Somebody was walking by. I thought they were walking up to the front door. But anyway, so yeah, it was the beginning of the end. We were like one of 130 stations around the country in a lot of these small markets that were picking up this feed, the hot new country feed from the Jones Radio Network. You know what? That was it. That means in those markets, that's 130 people who aren't doing the midday shift because there's only one in Colorado. That's 130 people who aren't doing the night shift. The evening, the 7 to midnight shift, which is a very big shift for radio. You guys remember, you're up, when you're a teenager, you call in Z100 to request a song when you're 12, 13 years old. And usually at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night when they know a lot of young people are listening. It was very different, and I saw that the writing on the wall, as much as I had wanted to do radio my entire life, the writing was on the wall. I mean, even today, you're in New York. We're in the number one market. So yeah, a lot of the radio is live. Okay? But, like, I'll give you a great example. A very good friend of mine, who I've known for a long time, is Al Dukes. He produces the Boomer and Carton show on WFAN every morning. Not Carton, I'm sorry, Boomer and Geo show. Used to be with Carton, now it's Geo. So, Boomer and Geo comes on in the morning here in New York City. Now, that's live. Yet, it's picked up in syndication by some stations, but what's more, it's televised live on the CBS Sports Network, which means you could be in markets all over the country. If you've got the CBS Sports Network, you're watching them in the morning, but not listening to your local station. All right? And that's pretty much the way, even one of the things they tried here, because in some of the larger markets, you do need local. The country station, Nash FM, they did a morning show that was syndicated across the country, yet wasn't centric to even though they were in New York, they weren't like talking about the Yankees or talking about the local high schools around here or talking about something that happened in Queens or a festival out in Jamaica, out on Long Island. And they ended up ditching that morning show to have a more local morning show. So we're lucky that we're here. We get the local stuff. A lot of the major markets still have personalities in the market doing local shows, but otherwise, a lot of the rest of the country, boy, these stations, they're just automated. Who knows where it comes in? You just pick it off the satellite, you put it in through your transmitter, and as a matter of fact, Mix FM has a couple of sister stations in Terre Haute. They're all automated. Whether it's the light rock that they play or the news talk, it all comes from somewhere else. None of it's local. And the funniest thing is when people would call me when I worked at that station for a year, the Hot New Country station, and they wanted to talk to the night DJ. I'm like, he's not here. He's in Colorado. I used to hate to say that to him, but it was true. They thought he was right around the corner. So let's go ahead and move on to television. All right. Now, of course, as I've said many times, and I will continue to say it, we are a visual being. We love to be visually entertained. Okay? When movies came along, we're going to talk more about the movie chapter later on in the semester, but when movies came out and people just flocked to the theaters because they love that visual medium, we love to be visually entertained. Okay? We just love it. So when the idea of television came along, people wanted to really jump on this idea. Now, as you can see, I've got a couple of photos that I've attached. In the late 1920s, a guy from the Midwest, okay, he comes up with this idea for what he calls the Image Dissector. And basically what this is that he's taken like the lens from a camera. Like, you ever see those old cameras where the photographer would get underneath the curtain and it would be this big camera in front of him, almost like a big box? Well, he took one of those big lenses. Truck just went by. He took one of those big lenses. He then used that electronic energy. Remember, they were doing a lot of stuff with electricity, using that, harnessing that electric energy. He would take that electric energy, so he would point the lens at you, and with the electronic energy, able to capture what you're looking at and put it on a screen live. So instead of just being a still photo or being something like a film where you're taking a picture every like half a second or every quarter of a second, a photograph every quarter of a second like you would with film, you would be, hi, how are you? Look at me, and you'd look at the little screen not far away and you would see you waving and doing this. And this is where television came about. Well, this guy out in the Midwest comes up with this idea. Unfortunately, nobody knows the exact way it came about, but someone got the rights to develop television. And in 1939, television was introduced to the world. It was at the New York World's Fair in 1939. For those who don't know, if you happen to know New York City, way out by Citi Field. Okay, you got Citi Field, you got Arthur Ashe Stadium, and then you have Flushing Meadows in Queens. That's where the New York City World's Fair in 1939 and 1964 were held. But the 1939 World's Fair had a lot of different things. And in the RCA Pavilion, with NBC Radio Live, introducing television was none other than David Sarnoff. And it was great because, of course, remember, people have never seen this before. All right, this is brand new. So you could be walking into the RCA, but as you can see from the picture I sent you, you'd be walking into the RCA Pavilion and be like, oh, look, Muffy, there's that David Sarnoff, the RCA guy talking about, I don't know, he's talking into that big camera there. Oh, wow, isn't that neat? And then you go into the pavilion, there's a screen, and you see him, and you hear him, and you're like, wait, he's doing that right now. He's saying that right now. And of course, this was the beginning of television. Television was the big hit of the 1939 World's Fair. And it looked like television was about to be unveiled to the world. But before the fair ended, on September 1st, 1939, I think a lot of you who actually paid attention in your history class know, on September 1st, 1939, Adolf Hitler and Germany invaded Poland. 2 days later, France and Britain declare war on Germany. World War II has now begun. And even though America would not get into the war for over 2 more years, President Roosevelt already knew something was going to happen, and eventually we'd have to get involved. And even though what drew us into the war was the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, December 7th, 1941, even before that, President Roosevelt had started to prepare us to go to Europe. And that's a big reason why he had signed the Atlantic Charter midway through 1941 with Winston Churchill in Great Britain, because he knew this was going to happen. And so a lot of our resources had already started in going towards the war effort. So television got put to the side. Okay, so Sarnoff would go ahead and he would help with the war effort. He would get the title general. He loved to be called General Sarnoff for the rest of his life. And so now, after World War II was over, he immediately gets his people, and pretty much right before, right around that time in early 1945 when you could tell the end was near, he would now start throwing his resources into television. And by 1948, we have the first ever television network. That is the NBC Television Network. And of course, CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System, followed very close behind, and then came ABC. And a lot of local stations would start popping up also, who would eventually become affiliates of NBC, because Sarnoff already knew about this network stuff. And he right away set that up. He said, on the flagship station of the NBC Television Network, you little TV stations around the country, yeah, you're going to need talent. You're going to need programming. Well, here's the thing. I provide the programming. You grab my feed through cables. You then broadcast my NBC programming on your TV station in Des Moines, Iowa, in Bangor, Maine, and San Antonio, Texas. And we'll then split the profits on the advertising. So he had already knew that setup and how it was going to work. But now, of course, was the programming. It was like, wait a minute, where do we get the talent? If we're going to have all this programming and it's the visual medium, we got to have talent from somewhere. Well, the early television sets, as you can see from the pictures, usually had only like a 3 or 4 inch screen. They were tiny. And for talent, you can't go to movie stars because movie stars like the big screen. So, of course, you went to radio. And we've already talked about this, how radio was raided of its talent. But now, what's it going to look like? Who's going to be the person who makes television something that people really want to get and want to watch? Well, as you can see here, the first great television star was right here.
We're the men of Texaco, we work from Maine to Mexico. There's nothing like this Texaco of ours. Our show tonight is powerful, we'll wow you with an hour full of howls from a shower full of stars. We're the merry Texaco men, tonight we may be showmen, tomorrow we'll be servicing your cars. I work the pipe, I pump the gas, I back to back, I set the clock, so join the ranks of those who know. and fill your tank with Texaco. Sky Cheap, fill up with Sky Cheap, and you will smile.
Like I said, NBC, David Sarnoff, we already knew how this was going to work. This is the Texaco Star Theater. Sponsorship, advertising.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, introducing America's #1 television star, your June bride, Mildred Burrows. Have you heard I married an elephant? It is really...
All right. That, of course, Milton Berle. In 1948, soon after NBC goes on the air, all right, they're looking for, and variety shows were the real thing to go with when television first came about. It was like, well, variety shows, you have a little bit for everybody. You know, you'll have some comedy, you'll have some music, you'll have some dancing, maybe a stand-up comic, maybe a little drama here and there. But the variety show was the way they wanted to go. And a lot of the networks would go ahead and produce variety shows. So NBC comes up with the Texaco Star Theater, and they tried a couple of different hosts out. And then they tried this guy. Now, he was an old radio host, old stand-up comic, an old vaudeville comedian from back in the 1920s. And his name was Milton Berle. And he was the breakout star. He was called Uncle Milty. People just loved to tune in every Monday night at 9 o'clock to see Uncle Milty in the Texaco Star Theater. Well, he ended up becoming television's first ever star. All right? He was the talk of the country. But what's more, he gained the moniker Mr. Television. Here's the reason why. In 1948, when NBC, the NBC network, went on the air, there were only 50,000 television sets across America. Okay? There may be now 50,000 television sets just in 2 towns in Bergen County. All right? But there was only 50,000 television sets in the entire country. That was in 1948. By 1950, there were 500,000 television sets. And a lot of people, when they look at it, said they attribute that to people getting TV because they wanted to see him. But there was another reason, too. Another reason that doesn't always get talked about is that something had happened in this country. A great American phenomenon had happened in this country that helped to grow television. Now, let's think about this. In 1945, World War II ends, especially in Europe. That was in May. Okay? So victory in Europe happens in May of 1945. A lot of the doughboys come home. Well, who did they come home to? They come home to Rosie the Riveter. All right? Rosie the Riveter was working 10-hour shifts, 6-7 days a week. When the doughboys came home, Rosie said, you know what? You're home, you work, put a ring on my finger, get me a house, we're getting married. And that's what happened, is a lot of guys and women ended up getting married, and sure enough, what started to happen? The baby started to come. Yes, you have the beginning of what's called the baby boom. The baby boom was from 1946 to 1963. So now you have all these babies being born. Now, remember, we are a visual being. We love to be visually entertained. By 1946, we had sold 90 million movie tickets a week. It was not uncommon that you would go to the movies 3, sometimes 4 days a week. But some of you are thinking, because of what we know today, it's not like you were driving to the multiplex every, 3 or 4 days a week. No, what it was is in most towns and cities, okay, movie theaters were only about you could go never more than a 6-block walk from your house. Okay? For example, take towns like North Arlington, where the Arlington Theater is, or Ridgewood, where the theater is in Ridgewood, or Westwood. Okay? All those theaters are right in the center of town. All right? So people, in most cases, never more had a 6-block walk. And there are a lot of smaller theaters that no longer exist, but used to be in places that you would never even think. If you go to like the Historical Society of your town and you look for like theaters in the 1940s in your town, you're going to find them in places you never knew. Like there's a house or there's a bank there now, okay? Yet there used to be a theater, and everybody, you'd come out of your house, and on Monday you'd take a left to go that way. On Tuesday you'd make a right to go that way. On Thursday you're crossing the street to go down that way. 90 million movie tickets a week. But something happens in the theater when you try to bring a baby, don't you? Isn't that like one of the most annoying things on the planet? When somebody comes into a movie theater and brings a baby with them and the baby's crying? Well, of course that was starting to happen. But then, in 1948, you've got the NBC and the CBS television networks. You got Uncle Milty and everybody wants... And so basically, now that Rosie's got her ring, now that she's got her house, now that she's got her husband, now that she's got her babies coming, she's like, I'm not dragging this baby to the movies, but I want to watch something. Husband, go get me a television. I want to watch Uncle Milty. And that's basically what happened, is that Milton Berle drove television sales. Okay? So the variety show pretty much became a staple. All right, Uncle Milty. Now, the next one I want to show you has to deal with the guy who CBS hired in 1948. Of course, Milton Berle's doing great with the Texaco Star Theater. He's on Monday night. So CBS decided they were going to do a Sunday night show, and they were going to call it Toast of the Town. So what they did is they didn't get some, talent was so hard and difficult to find. So they found this guy who actually was an entertainment reporter for the New York Daily News. And so he was a gossip columnist, and he knew a lot of stars and stuff. And they thought maybe, his influence would bring stars onto the show. But the guy was just, he was bland, he was boring. And as a matter of fact, the Emerson Television and Radio Company was the sponsor of Toast of the Town. And after 2 months, they told the president of CBS, they said, listen, we're not sponsoring the show anymore. This guy is horrible. He's a horrible host. You get rid of him. I'm sorry. You're not getting rid of him. We're leaving. So CBS, after 2 months, was going to fire this guy. But out of nowhere, business people, I guess, talk. Out of nowhere comes Henry Ford III, the owner of the Ford Motor Company. And he loved what this guy was doing. So he said, if Emerson Television and Radio is not going to be your sponsor anymore, how about the Ford Lincoln Mercury dealers? So sure enough, starting in late 1948, all the way through till the show's end in 1971, your Ford Lincoln Mercury dealers were the sponsor of Toast of the Town, which later became known as the Ed Sullivan Show.
Introducing the Beatles again, may I point out that they'll be on our show, as I told our audience, for the next 2 Sundays. Next Sunday from Deauville Hotel in the Miami Beach, show starring Hollywood's exciting Mitzi Gaynor. But ladies and gentlemen,
well, she was just 17, you know what I mean.
75 million people turned into this Sunday night in February of 1964 to watch Ed Sullivan introduce what, of course, would eventually become the single most successful music band in world history. 75 million Americans. This is at a time when there's only about 270 million Americans. So if you got 75 million watching these guys, not bad. And I guess because I'm not letting them load up too quickly, the time was off by about a second or two, but that's the Fab Four right there. Thanks to Ed Sullivan. Oh, just dropped my glasses. Okay. We'll try this. We'll try to pause the next one. Okay. Now, for many years, there were 3 networks. There was ABC, NBC, and CBS. Of course, NBC and CBS were the first ones in 1948. ABC would soon follow. And that's pretty much the way it was until the Fox network premiered in 1986. But for a brief time, there was another network. In 1950, some guy who just decided, I'm going to do this, his name was Alan Dumont. Alan Dumont suddenly decides, I'm going to do the Dumont Television Network. Just out of nowhere. Okay? So he decides to found the Dumont Television Network. Now the problem was, as we talked about a long time ago with the Fox network, the problem was finding affiliates. Remember, most television markets, even today, still only had 3 over-the-air television stations. So finding the affiliates was going to be very difficult. Well, of course, it would help if you had good programming. Well, he's going to follow suit with the others. He's going to do the TV variety show. And he gets this young guy, a young comedic entertainer, who would take this show called Cavalcade of Stars and just take it to the moon. And he was, as he's always been named, the greatest.
Presenting the Cavalcade of Stars. Here's a show you are bound to enjoy. To play to and just like a kid to adore. And our fun and frolic was start to know how. The show will start in just a minute before, but now.
Good evening. You know, friends, the druggists of America fill over 200 million prescriptions each year, and each one is filled with the utmost...
All right, we'll miss the druggists.
Our drugstore, let's get on with the Cavalcade of Stars. And here he is, the star of our show, Jackie Gleason.
And so Jackie Gleason would be the host of Cavalcade of Stars on the Dumont Network.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I feel wonderful tonight. I was playing golf all afternoon.
Okay. Now, of course, Jackie Gleason took over. And all of a sudden, he was becoming very popular. And in certain markets, they were now dropping themselves as maybe an ABC or a CBS affiliate and becoming a Dumont affiliate because they wanted their market, people wanted to watch Jackie Gleason on Cavalcade of Stars. And what he would do is he would bring these characters, whether it was Joe the bartender, or the hapless rich guy, Reginald Van Gleason, or, of course, this down on his luck, always trying to get rich quick scheme, a bus driver from the Flatbush section of Brooklyn named Ralph Cramden. And they would nickname that little skit the Honeymooners. Well, this went on for a couple years to great success for Dumont. But Dumont didn't have a lot of money. And almost like for those of you who follow basketball, baseball, when a rich free agent's out there and you're a team that just can't afford it, your best players take off. So in 1952, as Dumont was at least enjoying some success and making some money thanks to Jackie Gleason, CBS came along. And William S. Paley, the president of CBS, went to Jackie Gleason. And he said to him, hey, I see Dumont's not paying you much. I'll give you $8,000 a week to come over to CBS. Now that's in 1952. I'm going to tell you right now, people. In the year 2021, if somebody came up to me and offered me $8,000 a week, you're not watching these videos anymore. I mean, even today, $8,000 a week is a lot of money. So back then, it was huge. And of course, Dumont could not match $8,000 a week. So Jackie Gleason goes on, takes this variety show to CBS. Now what happens is he tires after a while of doing the variety show. You know, I had done it for about 6 years. I'm really kind of tired of it. So what he decides to do for one season, he decides to just take one of his skits and turn it into a situation comedy. Now, sitcoms were barely in their infancy. There had been a couple that had worked really well, some that were very successful. But this one, even though it was only for one season, this one is widely acclaimed as being the greatest situation comedy of all time.
attack or something?
Well, Norton, how do I look?
Divine! I don't know how you're going to do with these bar and clubs, but in that bar and outfit, you are divine.
Thank you, Norton.
Well, did you bring something down we can use for a ball? Oh, yeah. I got this here pincushion. That's good enough. That's all.
Perfect. Let me have it.
I want you to have a stand to put it on. Let me have it. Huh? I have. What's the matter with you? There's pigs in it. What do you expect to find?
Let me try to get this to where.
Will you stop with that? Come on, Norton. I only got 2 days to learn how to play golf. Wait a minute. Only get the door. Wait till I shut the door. All right, look out.
Somehow the sound and the picture are off slightly. I'm trying my best, people.
Got no time to do it by the book. I only got 2 days. Go ahead, go ahead. What's it say in the book? Now you're getting smart. To Emily, whose slice inspired me to write this. Read the instructions. The golf swing. First, step up, right? Press the ball. How should I know? That's what it says here.
Well, read a little further. Maybe it explains it.
Oh, that's all it says. Press the ball. Wait a minute. I think I know what it means there. Here, give me the club. Step up. Plant your feet firmly. Hello, boy!
Alright, I don't know why it's not working the way it should. Who the hell knows? I wish I could figure this out. Maybe COVID will just go away and I could have in-person classes again. But as you can see, this is a scene from The Honeymooners. 1 season, 39 episodes. And yet, it is still widely acclaimed. And if you don't think so, check out Channel 11 every night. Channel 11 always has The Honeymooners on late at night. And during like Thanksgiving or New Year's Day or something like that, you might find your grandparents or your great-grandfather in another room while everybody else is, having the turkey or finishing up whatever the meal is, and he's sitting down watching The Honeymooners marathon. It doesn't matter what language, they'll put it in another language. I mean, it is just funny stuff. And still widely considered to be the greatest sitcom of all time. All right, we're going to stop right there. We got more of the history of television coming, probably Thursday or Friday, one of the two. I'm going to try to shoot for Thursday, and maybe I'll try to get it into a classroom. Who knows? But I've got radio quizzes. I'm going to finish grading them because I did get a lot last night that I didn't get to yet. I know a lot of you already did get your radio quizzes. So the rest are coming, and we'll talk to you soon.